On behalf of the Office for Patient Engagement, otherwise known as OPEN here at LKC Medicine, and the College of Clinician Scientists, Academy of Medicine Singapore, I'm delighted to welcome you to our Patient Partners as Agents of Change seminar today. So this is part of OPEN's new Open Conversation series, where we aim to bring interested people together in the patient engagement community to learn and collaborate and network together. So my name is Joanne Matsky-Nankervis. I'm the faculty lead for OPEN, and I'm going to be facilitating today's session. So today we've got a broad range of speakers who are going to share with us their experiences and their tips regarding patient and public involvement in the area of genomic medicine. But I'm sure regardless of what your background is or where you work, you'll be inspired, whether you be a researcher or a clinician or patient advocate, patient partner, or an educator. There will be something here for you to take home away with you today. So with all of that, I'm delighted to welcome our first speaker, Ai-Ling Semdevadis. She's the Deputy Director of OPEN, and she is going to provide some of the background to PPI at LKC. Thanks you, Ai-Ling.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. It's such pleasure having all of you here this afternoon. Thank you. So I'm Ai-Ling, and I am with the Lee Kong Chian School of Medicine Office of Patient Engagement. I bring patients' voices into medical research and education. But before that, why I'm into all this work is because I was a breast cancer survivor. And that brought me into the heart of healthcare. So 7 years ago, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, something nobody expect or want to. But that brought me to the heart of healthcare. I was working in healthcare for many years, but I didn't really know what it was like to be a patient, truly, until I became one myself. And I began to see things from a different lens. And that was why after I completed my treatment, I became a patient advocate. And in that space, I have been working with many patient advocates in Singapore and across the world. And that has been really one of the most meaningful things I've done. And I'm really glad that some of them are in this room here today, which I'll be very glad to introduce to you later as well. So in all this work, being a patient advocate in Singapore, I was also really glad to be able to work with many patient advocates, but also witness the growth of patient engagement and involvement in Singapore. So some of you who we have friends from all over the world here today, yeah? I would say we have people from Singapore and also people from UK. Any other countries? Do you have other countries here today? Australia? Yes. Greece? Yes. Thank you. Yeah, so we have people from all over the world. And in many of these countries, UK, particularly Canada, you would have been involving patients for a long time. But in Singapore, this is something that is relatively new. But I'm glad to say that in the past few years, things has been moving, right? And patient and public involvement in Singapore is growing in the last few years. I'm glad to be able to be part of that and to witness that. Today, we have more than 100 patient organizations in Singapore and counting. And not only that, there's growing patient involvement and engagement in various areas from research, which is what we are trying to do here in LKC Medicine, healthcare improvement, patient safety, health technology assessment, drug development, patient education. And these are pictures from events from across different organizations, not just LKC. We have in the middle here, this one is from ACE, the HTA agency. This is from SPAN, and we have some of our friends from SGH and SPAN here. SCRI, we have friends from SCRI here as well, the Singapore Clinical Research Institute, as well as the Alliance of Patient Organizations. So there are many such programs that are coming together, which I'm really glad, right? And we have consumer panels now for ACE, as well as PRECISE, as well as patient and family advisory councils in the various hospitals, and now PPI for medical research and education at LKC Medicine. So what do we do here at LKC Medicine? I just would like to share. The Office of Patient Engagement, or OPEN for short, which Joanne had mentioned. we are the catalyst for integrating patient and public voices into medical research and education. So what we do is we empower our patient partners to be active contributors. We do so by enabling them. We enable them to bring and to help them to integrate PPI into the medical research. And we also work with educators to bring PPI into our MBBS program. We advocate for inclusion of patient voices. We partner with patient advocates, patient organizations, healthcare organizations, people within the patient engagement landscape, as well as empowerment. Empowerment is so important for this to grow, and that means helping our not just patient partners, but clinicians, researchers, to empower them with the knowledge and skills in PPI to bring this forward. So in all this work, we bring patient and family perspective to research and education, and you can see here in some of the examples of work that we had done in the last 1 year. And we have a dedicated approach here to PPI in LKC. I mentioned about, partnering with researchers and educators, partnerships, capability building. But a core part of this is really about patients. And to do so and to work with our patient partners who want to be involved in medical research and education, we have set up Open Voices, which is a community of patient partners. And today we have more than 52 patient partners. We will launch that in November last year. And it is a diverse group from 19 years old to 80 years old, multi-ethnic, include caregivers, well persons, people living with all sorts of conditions from cancer to diabetes, bronchiectasis. So this is something that we had brought people together to do. And meet some of our patient partners. Some of you have seen him coming in. Elio, he's behind there. And he's been involved in this space as well in patient engagement. And Ray as well, she's in front. She's our co-moderator later. And and many more. Kelvin, Sherry, and many more. So, this thing is a bit laggy. Okay. So, in all, our patients have been involved since last year in numerous projects, about more than 15 at the moment, across patient engagement, research projects, education projects. And I would say we are really glad to be able to partner with researchers and educators and our administrators to do so. And this is the start. And I mentioned about growing PPI capability, which I feel and we believe is really, really important. Sorry. Too fast. I relied on myself. I think I pressed too many times earlier. But when I talk about PPI capability, I think that's really important as we grow this PPI in Singapore. And we do so through various workshops, including the one that we're organizing right here today. And as Joanne had mentioned, this is our first seminar, which is about a PPI open conversation. And we hope to do more for the entire patient engagement lens community here in Singapore. So one of the things that we did last year was the Patient Voices Symposium. We're really glad to be able to bring in more than 200 patients, clinicians, researchers, healthcare professionals, industry, academia together at a platform to learn more together, to network and to collaborate. Now, instead of me rattling on, I thought I would show you the highlights from this event so you could see what this is all about.
The Patient Voices Symposium 2024. Today's event is brought to you by the Lee Kong Chian School of Medicine's Office of Patient Engagement, also known as OPEN for short. And they were set up to bring together patient and public voices into medical research and education.
I'm very pleased to be here today with all of you to elevate patient voices and public voices in medical research and education.
and the launch of Open Voices.
I extend to you my story not merely as a chronicle of hardship, but how love and passion can convert the scars of suffering as mere reminders of a journey endured, lessons learned, and courage rediscovered. Each note played begins a journey anew, a reminder that even in our frenzy, even in our bewilderment, we might find pathways illuminated by love and passion.
I think Singapore has huge assets to advance the world in this domain.
Be the change you wish to see in the world, at least in the research world.
To me, it's about meaningful collaboration. Your patient's partner need to understand what is it that they can contribute meaningfully.
We want to come together. We talk about open voices, but in rare disease context, we want to have one voice.
And today, I am grateful to be in remission, but also grateful to be able to continue to care for my elderly parents and parents-in-law, and more importantly, to be able to work together with patient advocates in Singapore and across the world.
Being part of the Open Voices Patient Partner Network means a tremendous amount to me because everyone on this panel has different conditions. And as we want to see the changes to healthcare and changes to our condition management, actually so too can we make those changes ourselves.
Patient Voices Symposium has been just amazing. The people, the energy, the creativity, Singapore and Open has everything it needs to launch this further. I'm so hopeful and thrilled to have been part of this and really looking forward to see how this is going to grow. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, everyone. I hope that gives you an idea what went on last year. Yeah. And if you were there, I think it was even more exciting, right? So, well, we're planning for the next one this year. So join us. More akan datang, all coming soon. Yeah. So, well, so we have started all that, right? And I would say that we've just started. We've just started opening the road, trying to lay the road forward. And there's a lot more to be done. But where do we want to go? Really, it is about creating more opportunities for patients and public to be involved in medical research and education. And that is only to be able to be done together with all of you here, because we need to partner with researchers and educators to create these opportunities to bring patients and the caregivers and public into this space to work together. And in doing so, we are also talking about developing capability building programs. So this is where we want to go. But how do we get there? I think that's always the question, right? It's there, but how do we get there? Right? Well, to us in Open, I think what's really important to us is having patient partnership as the true north. That is the most important in whatever we do, whether we get funding, which is really important, by the way, also, but whether we partner with more researchers and educators and, the capability building programs that we do, it's always about working together with the patient and not for or through them. So, and in this work, and that is why we're having this seminar today, this open conversation, because I think we have lots more. There are a lot of challenges in front of us. There's lots more that we want to do. And we hope that through this conversation, we could perhaps help us to find some tips, some insights onto how do we get there? What should we do more to embed PPI into medical research? what will help patient partners to be an agent of change, and what will help researchers and clinicians to include PPI into their work. It is a total partnership. So with that, I leave everyone to reflect and also to ask more questions later to our panelists, whom will be able to share with us some nuggets of wisdom on the way forward. Thank you very much.
So thanks very much, Ai-ling. So Ai-ling's done a great job in helping to lay some of the initial foundations, and we're going to build on these now. So I'll get you to flick to the next slide, Charlie, and then you're going to be up. So Charlie Vickers is our next speaker. He is the Public Engagement Officer at the UK Academy of Medical Sciences. So a little bit of a mouthful there, which is ironic given that you're a science communications person to have a nice long title. So Charlie's going to share with us now about some of the activities at the Academy, and we'll look forward to learning more. Thanks very much, Charlie.
Thank you. I think I've only used one of these mics for karaoke before, so this is a bit of a different experience. But yeah, I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone here for having us. This is the first time we've done anything internationally from the Academy of Medical Sciences. From a PPI perspective, our international team is here, so you can talk to them about a lot of their work. But from a public and patient involvement perspective, this is our first piece of work. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what the Academy does, but then talk about kind of how we've involved patients and the public in a particular piece of our work on child health that's run over the last 2 years. So why do we matter? So this is a slide that I've stolen from our president and our chief executive, so I didn't make this specially. But the reason I wanted to highlight it is because all of the people we work with, it's not working, but I wanted to point out the patients on the top of the screen there above diagnostics and just say that it shows that patients are really important in everything we do. You know, there's government, there's clinicians, there's researchers on there, but patients are really crucial to that. And as the voice of medical research in the UK, it's really important that patients are part of that conversation. And I think this slide highlights that really well. And here we go. So this is our public engagement team at the Academy. So there's 5 of us who I wanted to show, and we kind of work across the Academy. And I realized that when I sent these slides to Mira earlier, that I'd put them in the wrong order. And so you're going to get our team and then what the Academy does, unfortunately. But this is us, and we work across the Academy doing lots of different public and patient involvement work. And I think there's 5 of us who do it kind of as our day-to-day job, and that's what we're there to do every day. But what I wanted to mention was that we're really well supported by a number of people. And so I included Nick, who's our director and fights our corner all the time. But also importantly for us, we've got Rabana, who's our regional manager, and talks about quite a lot of the work we do around the country. So I found out that nobody knows that the UK has kind of got slightly different healthcare systems in England, Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales. So what we do is we have to speak to people in those regions all the time to make sure we're kind of the UK voice. We're not just being the England voice, and Rabana does a really good job of that. And then Vivian, I don't know how she does everything she does as our equity, diversity and inclusion manager, but she makes sure that we're listening to a range of voices. And I think that's really important when we're doing what we're doing and listening to patients and the public and embedding them in our work, that we're listening to a diverse range of voices. So now we're going to go back to what the Academy does. So hold this idea in your head. So when I talk about the Academy kind of to external people, I look at it in 2 big strands, and this is one of the first one. And I'm not going to talk too much about this because it's a little bit removed from what we do, but we're a grant funder. So for people to do science research, whether that's kind of the materials or lab time or those kind of things, we provide grant funding for that. And there's loads more information about that on the website. I've included links if people are interested. And then our programs is kind of about taking people onto the next stage of their research career. So we've got a group called Sustain, which is to support women in research and kind of take them and give them kind of training and mentorship as well, but also a cohort who can connect and collaborate and kind of support each other as they go. But the main area I'm going to focus on is our policy work. So what we try and do is we try and influence policy on medical research and medical health in the UK. And we do that in various ways, whether that's through meetings, workshops, as we're here doing kind of an international policy workshop with the College of Clinician Scientists. And we've got some fantastic people, and it's another reminder for me to thank Eileen and all the support we've got from her with setting that up. And it's actually, as I said, it's the first time we've done any of this, so it's been a massive learning curve, and not just to Eileen, but to Lucy, Laura and Adam, who've come from the UK as well. I've learned so much from them already, and we haven't even had the workshop yet, so it's been a really good opportunity. But the reason I wanted to talk about policy is it's something we've done for a long time, public involvement. We've done it since 2008, so we're maybe in compared to Open, maybe slightly further along the journey. But that's not to say we haven't got a lot more to do, and I'll talk a bit more about that. But I think that kind of longevity of way we've involved people throughout has meant that the partners we work with, whether that's government, whether that's other charities, now see us as a really good place to involve patients and the public, and sometimes come to us for support with that as well. And I think that's a massive credit. 2008 was a little bit before my time at the Academy, so it's a massive credit to those who've gone before me as well. But primarily I'm going to speak about our child health work, which has been kind of just over 2 years in the making. And I think it's a really nice way of showing the impact that PPI can have. And I think that's the thing I tried to keep in mind when I was putting this together was the impact that PPI has had on this piece of work. And it also happens to be the very first piece of work I did at the Academy. So it's quite easy for me to remember everything that's happened. So when we start off a project in our policy team at the Academy, we have scoping conversations with those who are likely to influence and likely to be impacted, and also likely to have some kind of input to our work. And when we were talking about child health, we're obviously talking to researchers, to charities, etc. And one of the groups that we spoke to right at the start was parents, and that was really influential for us. Setting the tone throughout was involving people right at that early stage meant that parent voices, and I'll talk a bit more why it's parent voices, not the voice of young people in a minute, but why parent voices were so important to this. And from those scoping conversations, they suggested to us, it'd be great if you kind of went out and had some focus groups to find out what was important to parents in the UK. And to thinking back to what I was saying about the work that Rabana and Vivian do, kind of make sure that we were hearing from parents across the UK and a real diverse range of parents. And the one thing we learned at the time, and this is the beauty, I think, of PPI, is that when you're doing it, you might go into it with an idea of what you're going to find out in the conversations you're going to have. But we learned quite quickly. So the focus groups just by chance happened to be divided into parents who had children who are aged 0 to 5 and parents who had children who are older than 5. And we learned that those who've got children who are older just don't have a completely different set of priorities to parents of younger children, and that hadn't really occurred to us. And so as the focus of the project went to more parents of children 0 to 5, we knew then that we had to involve parents from that age group, and that is also why there are very few young people involved in this work, because as great as it will be to work with a group of 0 to 5s, I don't know what impact they'd have on a written policy report that's 25 pages long. So unfortunately, no 0 to 5s are involved in the making of this work. And then kind of as the project advanced, we set up a steering committee. So we're a fellowship organisation and the fellows are kind of elected for their contributions to medical science research. And we also have other people on those steering committees. So in this example, we had a health economist, which kind of is the one that comes to mind, but we also had parents involved, and it meant that parents were driving the work, and that parent voice was throughout the report. Every kind of page is kind of got the parent footprint all over it. And that kind of leads me on nicely to the point we were doing it, or our policy team, I should say, we're doing interviews with academics, kind of experts, charities that are likely to be affected. And we took this back to the steering committee with parents on it, and they said, yeah, but you haven't spoken to any parents. And they're a massive group of experts. So again, we went out and we conducted a load of interviews with parents to kind of find out, again, what were their priorities. And one of the things we did in this bit was making sure we heard from parents with different kind of experiences. So as an example, parents who have been through the adoption process, and making sure that, we were never going to be representative of the whole of the UK, where the population is approaching 70 million, but just making sure that kind of it was getting a diverse range of voices, and that's something we always try to do. And then as the project came together, and one of the reasons I think it's really been influential in the UK and kind of had the impact it's had on policymakers, etc., is because you can see that parent voice and kind of thought throughout. So you kind of got the executive committee, the contents of the report, and then you've got kind of a box that's dedicated to the opinions of the parents that we spoke to. And I think that has just been fantastic. And then throughout, there's quotes from parents who were involved telling us, we might have heard that dental hygiene was really important for children 0 to 5, and that's something that's been faced. But then we had quotes to back that up, and I think that just adds to the power of it. It's not just people aren't just data sets, they're real people, there's real lives. And I think that's one of the reasons why that kind of has helped be so influential. And parents reviewed it as well and checked it, and that's a big part of what the Academy's kind of policy team does in the review stage. And also, because parents are involved throughout, and we've been really fortunate to have a couple of parents who have had the time and the kind of knowledge and lots of things have fallen into place, that they've been involved right from those scoping conversations. So a couple of the parents were in the scoping conversations, and then they've been on the steering committee, and then they've kind of been part of the implementation. So when our policy team is going out and talking about it, sometimes we're able to send parents because they know this work as well as anybody. They probably know it much better than me because they're actually on the steering committee making the decisions and kind of making sure that parent voice was there throughout. And we've done some international work on child health as well, and parents have spoken about the report there. And I just think, I think the point that I'm trying to make particularly about the child health work is the impact it's had is because a lot of the work and the decisions and the driving behind it was done by parents. I think I'm coming towards my time, so I'm just very quickly going to say, because I've painted a very nice picture of the public involvement in the Academy, but we still got so much more to do. And I think we, as I talked about, diversifying the people we work with and the PPI contributors, and going to where people are. I was at a meeting we funded in a mosque recently, and I told the group to email me any feedback. And one of them said, "Don't be such an old man. Can't we just send you a WhatsApp message?" So I think that really highlights we need to talk to people in the way that they're kind of communicating. People aren't sending emails on a daily basis. And then we need to identify other areas across the Academy where we can support PPI. And I think that's really important and basically the big part of what the team's going to work on next. I've been given my time, so thank you. And please feel free to catch me later or ask any questions in a bit. Who am I handing over to you, Jenna?
Microphone, Charlie, because I'd like to welcome you to choose one of those seats. Thank you so much. And so in the true spirit of collaboration, we've only got 2 microphones, so we're going to have to make sure we share them. So we'll see how that goes for us. But so I'd like to now invite the other members of the panel up onto the stage. So we've got our clinician scientist, Joanne. Yeah, Joanne, welcome. And And then we've got our patient and public partners, Adam Clatworthy, Lucy Pearce, and Laura Mellis. So welcome up, guys. And co-moderating, my colleague Ray. So whilst everybody's getting settled onto the stage, if you've got any questions that kind of come up for you during the discussion today, just have a look at the scanning of the QR code. So it's much more socially acceptable to now have our phones out at events. So what we're going to do is we're just going to start off this session with a little bit of Q&A of our panel, and then we're going to come back to your questions. So please feel free to put them in as we talk. Now, nobody can introduce these people better than they themselves. So we're going to start off with everybody just providing a little brief introduction. So Joanne, I'll get you to start if that's okay.
Okay, hi everyone. Firstly, it's nice to see everyone. Happy New Year. We're still in the 15 days of the Lunar New Year. So Happy New Year to everyone. My name is Joanne Niao. I'm Associate Professor here at LKC. My area of interest is genomic medicine, how we use genetics and genomics to help people stay healthy or understand their risks and the rest of it. I wear 2 hats. There's a hat I wear where I'm part of the College of Clinician Scientists by the Academy of Medicine Singapore. And so this is kind of something that was birthed between Academy of Medicine in the UK and the Academy of Medicine in Singapore for a few reasons. When things like healthcare are moving very fast, And I think everyone knows that policy takes a while to change, right? So we are all sort of thinking about how can we actually do better, quicker, and with international collaboration. So not just between clinicians, scientists, and patients and public, but also between countries. How can we actually learn from each other so that we take the journey in a much shorter step to getting these policies for you guys? So these are the two sort of hats that I wear as I sit here on the panel.
Thanks very much, Joanne. So Adam, over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's my first time in Singapore, so I'm delighted to be here. Very nice weather compared to the UK. But yeah, my name's Adam. First and foremost, I'm a father. I've got 2 children who've got a very rare disease that was only discovered in 2019 called CRELD1. We were the first in the UK to get a diagnosis for our children, which we had to fight for a few years. So I've been doing a lot of trying to raise awareness for the parents having a voice in this whole odyssey. But my other hat is that I'm the vice chair for rare conditions for the Genomics England participant panel. And our role is really to hold Genomics England accountable for they essentially have all of our data, all of our DNA, our patient data, and making sure that we're really putting the voices of the participants and the patients first. So that's kind of what I've been working on for the past year, just to raise a bit of awareness for us. A lot of what Charlie's saying is we have a really critical role in making sure that the research community understands the patients at the heart. So thank you for having me.
Thanks, Adam. And Lucy.
Hi, I'm Lucy Pearce. I am a mum to 2 boys. I have a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old. And my eldest son has a form of craniosynostosis, which is where the bones are fused prematurely before you're born. So my son was the first kind of group of children to be discovered as having a genetic reason for his single citrus craniosynostosis. So he has the SMAD6 gene. It has been passed from my husband. My husband wasn't affected, so we didn't know anything about it beforehand. So we were kind of part of that first program. As a result of that, we've also kind of found out about the links to heart difficulties with the SMAD6 gene. So we've had some precision health support subsequently to make sure that both my husband and my son are well. My husband also has Lynch syndrome, so kind of experienced some kind of cancer screening side of things. And my mum has breast cancer, and that's so the genetic side of that I've then been supported for. So I've kind of got a few different ways kind of linked to genetics, really.
I think you've just seen one of the people that's probably going to talk the most in the workshop tomorrow. Gosh, that's so much experience that you can share, Lucy. And Laura.
Hi, I'm Laura. I'm one of the patients who was born with Apert syndrome. I've achieved a degree in business management, a high national diploma in childcare, working families. And I've grown to do lots of work in childcare myself. Being a teacher assistant, I'm currently working as now. For those who haven't heard of my condition before, I've got Apert syndrome, which is basically the fusion of the bones when I was born. Apert syndrome is caused by a mutation of a specific gene, which has been identified as the FGR2 gene, which is the fibroblast growth factor receptor gene 2, with just one gene, particular gene, being changed for another, and the other one being entirely normal. And this one small change in the gene can result in the physical features of the skull, hands, and the feet bones be fused together. That's a bit about me. Yeah.
Thanks very much for sharing, Laura. And last but not least, we've got Ray. Over to you, Ray.
Hi, I'm Ray. I'm a member of Open Voices, and I'm also caregiver to my 21-year-old daughter with rare chromosome disorder. When we first gave birth to her, she was undiagnosed because we couldn't find a match. So last year, when she was 20, we decided that it has improved vastly over the years. So we might want to, we could find something new. No, we didn't. So she's still one in the world, still a string of karyotype, not as mouthful as Laura. But we're still a mystery, but then again, all of us are mysteries, aren't we? So I'm very happy to be here today to be co-moderator, thank you very much for the invitation. And I hope that my contribution as a partner, a patient partner in Open Voices, will also allow researchers to find out more about this mysterious world of genetic conditions, and that the children of the future will not have to go through what we have gone through. Yeah. Okay, so let me continue with the first question for Laura. Laura, you provide the young person's voice, sharing your story to help inform research and to share important messages. Can you share with us some examples of any barriers you experienced and how you overcame this?
Yes, certainly. So navigating life with a craniofacial condition certainly comes with a lot of challenges in life growing up, certainly. But nothing's really been easy, obviously. My fingers being fused together at birth, and during my childhood, I obviously didn't really do day-to-day tasks like eating, the usual washing things and taking care of myself. But over time, I've developed strategies and adapted ways of completing those tasks. When I was younger, I had my thumb separated at first. So that's obviously gained the ability to hold a pencil and start drawing and hold a spoon to eat and things. And I discovered a way of manipulating objects, things like through that way. Whenever I went out and about in town or shops and school and things, other children have been staring at me for a particular reason. My condition was very visible when I was younger. But I just smiled back at them. It's simple as that. Just smiled back at them, just carried on with my day-to-day life, and just, that's what I do. But like my fingers and toes are fused together, and my feet have a protruding bone underneath them. Saying this, I've always been a very active person in my life. But when I was younger as well, I had to have special shoes made from the hospital. Had an impression in an insole, which is quite interesting at the time. Having unique custom-made shoes made for you, it's just very nice at that young age, But finding suitable shoes growing up in my teenage years was obviously tricky. But I wanted to have normal shoes, be on the fashion trends and things. So, but I managed that ever since. Got wide feet shoes at a higher size and things, so that's good. But now I still face challenges, as probably we all do. But even so, with my condition, there's something I can't do, like tying up shoelaces and fastening small buttons. But I'd always, like I said before, adapt ways of doing it. And I could always persevere and carry on with them. You see, my past experience can be challenging, but I developed a mental toughness, strength, and determination to solve anything that I've gone through, I have endured. And whatever life throws at my way, I can deal with it. For example, I passed my theory and my practical driving test first time round without any modification. So just moving forward, keeping that strength, keeping strong, and hopefully inspiring others. Yes.
Thank you, Laura. I think you're such an inspiration. Yeah. And you've given us a different perspective about appreciating our shoes from now on, being able to buy off-the-shelf shoes. Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much for your inspiration, Laura. My next question is for Adam. Adam, you have experience in the public relations and communications as part of your work. Can you give us some tips about communication that has been useful as you engage with researchers to communicate what was important to you and your family to create one research?
Yeah, sure. And it's not really any rocket science to it. I mean, as you say, I've worked in communications my whole career. I've worked with a lot of complex technology companies where you have to communicate a very tough, very technical stories to the mainstream audience. So I guess the main tips from my side are just really, you've got to tell a story, really think about what is the narrative that you want to tell and really put the personal journey at the heart of it. So in my case, when I first had the courage to talk about what we were going through, so it was our second daughter, Lola, that was first experiencing developmental delay and seizures. And when we first were trying to figure out what was going on, I finally plucked up the courage to tell people at work what we were going through. And I used my other daughter, Daisy, who was Lola's older sister. I told the story through her eyes. So we used to have a lot of in-depth conversations around her younger sister, why she was experiencing the life that she had. And obviously Daisy was very young at the time. So that helped me to kind of get our journey out there to an audience and really connect with people at a human level. Secondly is really think about your audience. Think about who you're trying to communicate to. And I think we all understand we're in a world where a lot of the terminology still goes over my head. We're working with genetics and the body. It's like, there's a lot I still don't understand. So I just really try and keep it as simple as possible, like cut out the jargon, ask the questions that a 7-year-old would ask. And, but also if you're trying to communicate to the research community, try and think about the type of language and the things that resonate with them. So focus on the personal journey that we were going through. And the third thing I'd say is think about using a variety of different channels as well. So when I first started talking about our journey, I actually I published an article on LinkedIn, and that's where I connected with so many people in the medical community. A lot of researchers use LinkedIn, a lot of the patient advocacy groups. But then as it went along, it's like, how do you use social media? So Facebook is obviously a great way to get the story out there. That's how we connected with a lot of the rare condition groups. We found our CRELD1 community on Facebook as well, which was they're all over in the US. We got a diagnosis through Facebook, quite simply. I was like any desperate parent. I posted a video of one of Lola's seizures on an epilepsy group, and we were still. It had been 2 years. We had no diagnosis. We had no idea what was wrong with Lola. And a mother from Canada reached out to me and sent a message and said, I don't usually go on Facebook, but I saw this video and it really struck a chord. The seizures are exactly like my son, Levi. They had a daughter that had this condition called CRELD1. They were part of a rare trial with Yale School of Medicine over in the US. We took all that information to the UK and we were basically told, there's no link between CRELD1 and epilepsy. What are you talking about, essentially? Long story short, 2 years later, we had another child, Alfie, with the same condition. We sadly lost Lola 4 days after Alfie was born. And I think that's the only reason why we were taken seriously. We then told them to test for this condition. 24 hours later, they tested for it. They found it, gave us the diagnosis. So the power of social media there through Facebook. And then it's like, what Charlie was saying around know your audience, know what kind of channels they're using. So not so much email, but TikTok, Instagram, they're great ways to get stories out there in a simple way. They're very visual. But also we developed a website as well. So we can post blogs, we can work with mainstream media. So we've had some great media awareness through the Sunday Times and through the BBC, just telling our personal journey. So yeah, simply it's like keep your message simple, focus on the personal journey so you can connect at a human level, and then think about the channels that you can use to get the story out there. So hopefully that helps answer the question.
Yeah, thanks very much for sharing, Adam. And I think, despite all the challenges, the impact that you and your family have probably made into research into this condition is inspiring, and it's a little bit heartbreaking to hear how hard you had to battle to get it to happen. But thank you for sharing that. I'm going to go the other side of the fence now. I'm going to go the clinician researcher to Joanne. So Joanne, you work with a lot of people with genetic conditions that predispose them to having an increased risk of developing cancer. And I know that you and your team do a lot of work with your patients and patient partners. And I'm just wondering maybe if you can give us an example of maybe how you've incorporated patient partners into some of the work that you do and the difference that has made.
Okay, thanks. Maybe I just, sort of step back a bit so that everyone's wondering why everyone's only talking about genetics and genomics here. But our workshop for the next 2 days is about how we make genetics and genomics more accessible. And I think you will hear through everyone's stories is that it was actually very difficult. It's been difficult in Singapore. It's been difficult in the UK in terms of getting access, getting the right access, and then the downstream care as well. And this is a global issue. So my day job is I see patients with a very strong family history of cancer. And sometimes this is due to rare conditions, but sometimes it's also due to quite common conditions, such as, I think you guys have heard of Angelina Jolie, for example, with the BRCA1, BRCA2. That's actually as common as 1 in 150 Singaporeans actually having a mutation in those genes. It's not rare. It's quite common. I mean, there are 60 of us here, right? So if there's double of this 60, it's about one person here would have that condition, right? So Lynch is the same. Lynch syndrome is a bit less common in Singapore than in the UK. It's about 1 in 400, 1 in 500. But these are the kind of conditions that I daily work with. And in terms of how I want to say I'm not a PPI researcher. I'm an accidental one because just based on these stories, right? Every day I have patients having problems with whether it's cannot pay for the testing locally, cannot pay for the downstream care, don't know where to go, don't know how to navigate the system. So one of the things is because of my research training, every one of these questions became a research project for us. We decided to then be clever about it, because I knew from the policymaker side, it's not that policymakers don't want to provide or anything, they just need the data that will then let them know what's the best way forward, how to provide and all that. So my team, no research project really starts without the patient's need first. So all our projects actually have been, there is this need, so we did the project and we then present the data to policymakers and then certain changes happen. So that's been our, it's not really a motto, it's kind of just necessities, day in, day out. So I'll give you an example, which is what you asked. So for example, I think a lot of people in Singapore are very concerned about insurance and genetic testing, right? And as you know, there is a moratorium with the insurance companies and all that. So when this work was coming out, a lot of it was triggered by the research that was going on, right? As you can hear, UK Biobank and Genomics England, and in Singapore, SG100K and all that, there were a lot of research. So the first moratorium was inspired because of research, not so much clinical care, where it was talking about how insurance companies cannot use research data for any kind of underwriting. So that's very clear, very straightforward, and everyone agreed on that. Then the next phase was for people who were going for what we call genetic testing clinically, what can the insurance companies access, not access. So it's a definitely important step in this direction. But one of the comments that came back was people with BRCA1, BRCA2 for certain kind of things needed to be excluded, right? Or there were some restrictions to that, which I had a big reaction to because it didn't make a lot of sense. So this was where we actually got our patient, because we've been running these patient support groups for many years. So we raised it with the patient groups, and the patient groups came up and agreed to enter into a focus group discussion facilitated by PRECISE and Ministry of Health. And we haven't had it changed yet, but there's a conversation about how we're going to change that wording so that certain people aren't excluded, right? So that's an example of how the patient voice was really, really successful, at least to get us on the table, at least have that conversation. We haven't quite changed the thing yet, but at least it's in discussion. The other thing to say is that we needed first that group of people. Like, can you imagine if that had happened and we didn't have the patient group ready to speak up? Then it would then take that much longer. So I think these are some of the examples I can give of how we've sort of engaged PPI. There are many more, but these are the two, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Joanne. So we're going to go next to Lucy. So Lucy, you have an education background and you're also currently completing a PhD. So based on your experience as an educator and now a researcher and a patient advocate, I was just wondering, in your experience, what do you think some of the most important things are that maybe researchers can do to better support patient partners?
Thank you. Yeah, I think there's two roles really. I think we as a population generally have a bit of a responsibility for ourselves and the knowledge that we know we hold and how we can share that. And I also think that the role of the researcher is really important. It needs to be made meaningful. And I think that, you've heard quite clearly today that explanations around the processes, the language, all of the acronyms are really off-putting for a lot of people. So simplifying that language is going to be really key. I think for those of us with lived experience, we need to remember just how important our experiences are, and actually don't be put off by that jargon and that terminology, because there is always a different way to understand something, and there's always a different way to kind of use words. So I personally believe that change is always possible, particularly within research. And actually the most powerful and meaningful change can always happen through collaboration. So we need to recognise the expertise that each member of the group brings, both the researcher and those with PPI. And we need to respectfully support each other, I think, to understand the concepts and ideas that are less familiar to each party. That does take time, but when it happens successfully, I feel from experience that actually each individual feels really valued and has a space to offer really meaningful contributions towards that kind of shared goal together. I also believe that for science, innovation and research, and essentially humanity, to kind of move forwards, we need to be embracing the reality of these lived experiences as the same value as academic experience. There can often be quite a kind of stigma around academia, but those of us that are working within it have a really powerful privilege to work creatively, to work scientifically with our minds, with those that perhaps may have less understanding of the scientific processes, the scientific language that we might be using, to make sure that those real-time connections can kind of happen, and break down some of those scientific construct barriers that exist. I also believe that as researchers, we need to remember that unless we're anchoring our research with lived experience, our ideas remain abstract concepts that in theory could work, but actually the moment that our ideas and theories and formulations kind of meet and combine with those lived experiences, they become a possibility. And that possibility is really exciting because it's then something that can be understood. It's something that can be explained to others. If you're connecting with those people with lived experience and they understand it, then the chances are lots of people are going to understand it too. And then we're working towards that shared future. I think a key barrier for those with lived experience is the fear around being good enough to be a PPI. And actually, we need to be supporting those people to understand the value that they have, to get past that jargon, as I've mentioned, and the technical terms. But by supporting them, we need to make sure that we're not just going, oh, come in and join us. We know this, you come and share. We need to be thinking about how we can combine our experiences right from day one. So I think we need to be broadening as researchers the breadth of methods that we use. You've heard a bit about that side of things from communication, but I think it goes deeper than that in terms of the research community. We quite often stay with the very same formulaic approaches to research. Are you going down a narrative route? Are you going down a systematics route? Actually, where's the flexibility in that? And we are creative beings. So kind of using that to our advantage, really, to maximize that engagement. I think the most powerful PPI contributions that I've been involved in have been when, as a PPI individual, I've been involved in before the research has even been decided. So there's a theme that is kind of being discussed. And we've worked then together collaboratively to think about what might our research questions be? What is your experience? What do you find challenging? What is tricky for you? And kind of having those kind of inquiry ideas. I know Charlie mentioned it earlier around that kind of scoping side of things, but it's almost even before that, I think. It's just those initial conversations. How are you engaging in the population that you're interested in supporting before you even get to a research question idea? Are you doing that? And if you're not, how could you perhaps do that using some of the ideas that have been shared? Once we were then building the research questions together, we were then able to think about what that research process might look like. And I sort of at that point actually stepped back as a researchee being researched too. I kind of became the researcher with the amazing skilled people at one of the universities that was doing the research. And collected the data alongside them, which kind of took my PPI contribution in quite a different route to what I was expecting, but was really exciting. And then after we'd collected the data and analysed it, I was part of the analysis. And then following on from that, we then published our findings and then reviewed them. And I think that's the other point that we often miss. We forget that PPI contribution within the reviewing stage. And that can be really, really powerful to identifying so what and what next, essentially. And then thinking about how you disseminate. People with lived experience know where they're getting their information from. So we need to kind of be tapping into that to make sure that when we're sharing the amazing skills and knowledge that you have as researchers, you've made sense of this really complex, sticky muddle, and you've created something that is really valuable. If you're not sharing it in the places where people are accessing the information, then you may as well not have done that research. So I guess thinking for yourselves and the contribution you're making, where are you placing your knowledge and your findings to make best effect, basically? I personally, as well, from my education background, feel that we need to be having these research conversations much earlier on. I didn't learn about research until much, much later. I was the first in my family to go to university, so my background wasn't in academia at all. And now, as you said, I'm crazily doing this PhD somehow. So I think breaking down barriers for people that may think that they can't access that as a space, they may not be feeling like they could hold their own in that space, is going to be a really important kind of conversation, really. Are we going into our schools and talking about what we're doing to spark interest in those creative minds of the really young?
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think, Eileen, the next time we get asked by people who wants to join Open Voices, we should show them a recording of what Lucy just said. If this is what you want to do, then yes, yeah, then right. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, I have the honor of asking the last question for Charlie. Charlie, you work with many patient partners in the academy with your team. Can you give us perhaps an example of when patient partner involvement or advocacy resulted in a tangible difference to policy or outcomes like what Lucy has been pushing for?
Yeah, I feel like Lucy's given so many examples, and Adam and Laura as well, of how PPI has an impact on research. And hopefully I tried to get some of that across and what we've done with our child health work on the impact that PPI has had. And it's just really interesting listening about how similar the wording is that we're all talking about, and we're all clearly moving the same direction, which I think is really interesting. Sorry, I'm going off topic. But yeah, there's so many ways that we hear about different ways that people are being that work is being impacted. So we the other side I was going to talk about it before I started waffling on too much about child health was about a PPI fund we've developed for people when they're starting and setting that research question before they apply for funding to do PPI at that stage and really set that question. Because I think the way we look at it at the academy is the earlier you can involve patients and the public, the better, and also the bigger impact they're able to have. But I think one thing we're guilty of maybe is we look at PPI as we would with any other kind of bit of work in science or in research where you can kind of measure the impact. And I think the challenge with PPI is showing the difference it's had at the end without kind of saying, well, what would have happened otherwise? Because you just don't know the shape and the direction. And I think the conversations are completely different when you involve people who have got lived experience. And I think that's the most important thing. Like, as I said with the child health stuff, because I'm not a parent myself, it never crossed my mind that people, and I know this is a really bad example because there's probably a lot of parents in here, but from my perspective, I hadn't realised that parents of children 0 to 5 would have a completely different outlook on parenting and the things that are important to them for those who are like 6 and above. So I think that, it's those changes and those things that you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know the conversation. I think we talk a bit about PPI being messy and messy, not in a negative sense. And it's not linear like a lot of researchers, I think, like to work. They like to see it as a kind of a bit like a research paper of like introduction, methods, results, discussion. It's not linear in any way like that. And I think so the impact's always hard to talk about. But the fund that I was going to talk about was, as I said, right at the start. And the impacts we've heard from people being able to involve people right at the start has been massive. From something as simple as patient information sheets, so people know what they're getting involved with, what the research is going to be about, what kind of, if it's related to a drug, what drug they're going to be taking, that kind of thing. So something really simple and kind of really obvious, I guess, right through to the data that people are collecting. So they're the people we work with, we heard that they wanted to collect a bit of data. I can't remember the area of research because we work with a lot of different people, but the data they were going to collect, they changed after the public involvement conversation because they wanted it also to have an impact on the patients right at the end. So they wanted it to be something that was relevant to patients and something that wasn't just something that you could detect in your blood, but actually something, the way the patients felt as well was really important. I think that's part of it is making the patients involved throughout means that end point is also relevant to them. And I think that's the thing that we try and talk about, is make sure that it's relevant to people right throughout. And then there's a lot of things you'll probably have heard from before and maybe don't need me to say again, but retention rates for trials and getting people to sign up for being in trials and being part of research projects, that's all, I think, all improved by PPI. And like Lucy and Adam and Laura said, dissemination of that, I think our comms team has done quite a big piece of work on how the voice of the patient involves whether people's research is covered in the press. And now, like I've got a slide when I talk about this in different spaces about, all the research you ever see is in the news, certainly in the UK, is kind of the patient-led voice. And, this has changed, my life has changed because of this trial. And you're not hearing from the doctor or the researcher or kind of, no one's talking about the drug or the intervention. They're talking about the lived experience and the way people's lives have been changed. And I think they're just a few of the impacts, I guess. But like I said, it's so broad that you never know what's going to come from one conversation. I think that's the beauty of it and also the challenge of it as well. And I think we need to face up to that sometimes.
Yeah, you can. And we also have some questions that are coming through. So you can, but and then we'll go to the general audience questions. So you can either again scan and put your question in there, or we can go old school if you want to put your hand up. So come and bring you the microphone. Joanne, you've got a question.
So I think one of the reasons why UK and Singapore were so similar in terms of so many ways, those are health systems and everything. So for example, it's the same here. Like our policymakers like to hear from the patients rather than from the doctors. That's for sure. But I have two questions to my PPI experts here. A couple of things. The first is, when I speak to the media and I say there's this really important case, we really should be featuring this and that, they're like, yes, it's very, we would love to cover it. And then they say, but we need the patient to be willing to be identified and have a photo taken. And in the local context, that's been sometimes very tricky. And so very often we end up having less ideal cases than, for example, where the real issue comes from, as an example. So that's one, is this how do you sort of navigate the media's sort of requirements for what it makes a good story versus from the standpoint of what actually might be a really important story in terms of for policymakers to know about. So that's question one. Question two is related to that, is very often the people who are willing to actually be photographed and to be in media then get asked 10 times, right, to do this, to be that same story 10 times. And so that becomes so dealing with patient fatigue. So maybe those two questions, it's open to anybody who wants to take that. Maybe.
Yeah, I can try. So sometimes it also takes someone doing something quite extraordinary as well to kind of get the media attention. So I've worked in PR for quite a long time. You always need a hook. I mean, we told our story and we got some kind of minimal media awareness, but sometimes it takes someone like through the work that we've been doing. I mean, this condition, CROLD1, there's only 28 children in the world that we know of that have got this condition. We were the first in the UK, but through the website that we've built and also getting the first paper published in the UK, the NHS didn't even recognise it as a condition until that first paper was published early last year. We had another family in the UK get a diagnosis for their son. They first got in contact in August through the website. They just said, we've now been given a name for this condition that our son Angus has, and we just want to do something. Like we connected with them, and the dad was like, I'm going to run a marathon. No, actually, I'm going to run 7 marathons. So he ran 7 marathons in 7 days. I stupidly joined in for one of them. That was the first time we actually met them. They only live an hour away from us in the UK, so we went to meet them. I had my running gear, so I joined in for one of the marathons. But that was what got the media attention. So it was first on the BBC radio. They'd heard about this guy. Why is he running 7 marathons in 7 days? Sometimes you need that to kind of get to the heart of why he's doing it. He was on BBC radio. Then the Mail on Sunday picked it up. Then the day the Mail on Sunday ran this story around this rare condition that their son has, why he's running the marathons. Then the BBC got in touch. So it's almost like it's a trickle effect, and you need something quite extraordinary to get their attention. That's when you can start to tell the personal story about why he's doing it.
Interested, but the patients aren't prepared to need a fix.
I guess there's an issue here of safety and your willingness to share, and if you ever feel maybe burdened by some of the expectations.
I was just going to say as well, I think it's about shifting that narrative. Why have we got that expectation that somebody's face has to be on that page? I guess it's about thinking and challenging those powers that be in the press to say, well, yeah, actually, this story is valid. You're interested in it because of the story. Let's think about what photos we could use aside from a face or aside from something else, and maybe challenging them to think about the purpose of that photograph, because I think a lot of it comes down to that gut feeling. Like you say, you want that hook in. You need that connection, because ultimately people are linked by connection, aren't they? But actually, if the connection motivation is misplaced, which it sounds like it is in this case, then actually we need to be challenging the ethics underneath that, I think, as professionals, and working out a different way. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So what we might do is start going to some questions from the audience, and we've got a really nice mix of questions. So the first question that came through, I'll just read it out, but then I might get a couple of you to comment on that if that's okay. So the first one is, please share with us how we can encourage patient engagement, especially in an Asian setting where the relationship between patients and physicians might be different from the Western population. So I was wondering, Joanne, maybe you can think about that for a minute. But then, Charlie, can you maybe reflect on some of the diversity inclusion work that maybe your team member also is involved in? Because I suspect part of that is trying to engage different groups where this might be a similar challenge.
So is the question about empowerment between, patient?
How to encourage patients to be engaged, particularly where there might be a power differential.
Yeah. So I think the first thing I've been doing this since coming back for about 15 years or so now in this space. And I would say that you need to model that behavior. And I tell that to my team. We need to model the behaviors, and they're all a few of them are in the audience, and they're smiling away. And I think it's not going to be overnight, this change, right? So I think what Open is doing is really important. Open is teaching patients and the public what do you need to bring, what are your rights, how do you ask certain things, I think I went for a few of the training workshops. That's why I know. And one of the reasons is because I go to training workshops because I want to be prepared for when the patients come with this. So the training workshops need to be 2 ways, right? You need to train the doctors to do this. You need to train the patients to do this. From my own personal experience, I'm pretty candid. If any of you ever saw me in the clinic, I'm exactly the same way I am with my friends or with my staff or with my patients. I'm just extremely candid. And I think this differential sometimes is somewhat self-inflicted, because I have a lot of patients that come in, they're very tentative, very nervous to ask me anything. When actually if they just ask, they'll realize it's okay. So I think the small message is just try, and then if there are clinicians in the room, you need to model that behavior for your juniors. I think one of the things that I've been a bit distressed about is the use of titles when I was training in medical school and coming out on the wards, nobody called anybody by professors, nobody called anybody by whatever. You were Dr. So, you were even, first names and all that. So I'm very against the use of titles, and I would actually really come down on my juniors for that. I don't have a very great answer, just little things like that I think needs to be modeled. And for those of you in audience, I think you guys just tell other people or go with your friends who are feeling a bit nervous just to model that behavior for them for the first time. And you actually find that actually doctors like to have a conversation, like to ask you about your gardening or your tennis or your whatever. They actually do. It's just that sometimes they may need to be reminded of it.
Yeah. Okay. Charlie.
Yeah.
This is a really challenging topic, isn't it? Because a lot of groups are underrepresented in PPI.
Oh, massively. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend we're doing a particularly good job at the academy. I think it's a real challenge. I think, like I said, we've been doing PPI work at the academy in our policy work since 2008, and I think if you looked at the profile of those people that we'd involved in that 16, 17 years, it would stereotypically be London or southeast based, white, older, and well educated. So we're still struggling with it. I think, as I said, with kind of go to where people are, I think a lot of that and a lot of the thoughts I have around that are really important. So we still ask people to come to we've got a very fancy central London office, thanks to this been handed down to us. So we still ask people to come to meetings there or in universities or on Zoom or Teams or kind of that kind of thing. And I think there's an expectation that people are comfortable and able to do that. And that might be the case for the likes of us who've maybe been to university and that kind of thing. It's quite a comfortable thing to do. But for, I'd say, the majority of the population, that wouldn't be a normal day-to-day activity. So it's really breaking down some of those barriers, I think, of just what the norm is and what we expect to be the norm. And I think, like I said, we're still learning and we're still trying to do a lot better. And I think the thing that I hope I do, looking at you three, is the thing is to be approachable and open to feedback. I think a lot of people, and we're the Academy of Medical Sciences, we're a kind of a fellowship organisation, so there's quite a lot of historical hierarchy to it. But I think the way of dealing with it is just, and I like your idea about not using titles. I would love to do that, but I don't think we'll get away with that at the Academy quite yet. But it's just things like that, and it's little things. It's making people feel more comfortable. And like I said, of the anecdote of the people in the mosque and telling me to use WhatsApp, that was something that we couldn't have done on our own as an academy. We would never have found that group of people and had that meeting in the mosque. That's so beyond anything we've been able to achieve. But because we're working with researchers and people in the communities, we've been able to do that a bit more. So I think there's some element of that of reaching out and admitting you're not going to be able to get to everybody. If you go back to the picture that I showed of our team, we are all white, so we're not all going to be relatable to everybody. And I think just, we're trying, but it's just lots of little steps at the minute, I think, for us.
Thanks very much. And I would say that we can't survive in Singapore without a WhatsApp group. So, you want to make a comment?
To just quickly weigh into this question about, this thing about Asian patients. And I think the heart of this is, can Asian patients, are they suitable for PPI? That might be the heart of the question, because we generally don't, we're known, Asians are not known not to ask questions and are very deaf. We respect hierarchy and all that. So are we suitable for PPI? I think that's the heart of it. My answer to this is, I don't agree. Because I think in this work that we have done, and we have, as I mentioned earlier, more than 100 patient organizations out there, big and small, formal, informal groups, right? Doing patient support groups and other things to advance the needs of our patients. So they want to help to advance this and work with healthcare professionals. They do things slightly differently, but yes, they want to be involved. That's one. Number two, I think the issue here is, in this work, ever since I've been involved and also in Open Voices, we have people coming to us, knocking on our doors. I don't need to go knock on their doors. They came to us and say, can we be part of Open Voices? We want to be involved in research. So as long as the access is there and they can see that they're well supported, there are opportunities to be involved. Maybe not all the population, the entire population, the people, but there will be a segment of the Singapore Asian population who will be interested. And as long as access is open and they can see they can be supported, I think they will come. And we need to help them to be involved. So that is my take to this question.
Why don't you drag up a chair? Because I've got another question coming up for you in a minute. Oh, well, come on. Okay. I've got a question that I think that it'd be, she can sit there if you want. Go on. All right, I'm going to drag you up in a little bit anyway, Eileen, because there's a question I think that you would be great to answer. Now, Adam, you talked about that Yale study earlier, and you've actually been trying to drive some research about questions that are important to the CREL1 community. We've got a question on giving an example where PPI has been involved in the design of either a trial or a research study. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about what that experience was like for you and how you worked with the researchers to help create something that was going to be important.
Yeah, sure. So when we first found out about CREL1, the first thing we did, like everyone does, is you Google it. And there was nothing. There was nothing on Google about CREL1 linked with epilepsy. Certainly nothing in medical literature. It was this other family in Canada that was part of this study with, I think it was GeneDx and the Yale School of Medicine. They had a very, very small cohort. So at the time, there were probably only about 14 families involved, all in the US. And they were working on publishing a paper that would essentially put CREL1 on the map in the medical community. So as soon as we got the diagnosis for Lola and Alfie, we were essentially added to this cohort with the Yale School of Medicine. And it was a pretty amazing experience because we were directly linked with the researchers that were working on the paper. And they asked us about the lived experience. They were really interested in how do the seizures manifest? What are the triggers? What does the day-to-day look like for you as a parent and a caregiver of your children? What are the things that we should be aware of in terms of developmental delay or muscle tone? All of these kind of things that are helping them shape the study and making sure it's going to be as valuable as possible. They also shared the paper with us before they sent it for reviews. So as you know, once you've got your paper, you then have to send it to all of the authors. And it's a really long process. I think it took about 2 years actually for that from start to finish. But them actually sharing the paper with us and is there anything you want to add? Have we portrayed your lived experience in the best possible way? And it was a two-way dialogue. It certainly wasn't just a one-way thing. And then I was also asking them questions around, okay, once we get this paper published, how can we then share it? We're in the process of building a website. And it was my mission from day one. I don't want anyone to go into Google and find nothing. I want us to be top of the rankings. CREL1.com. This is where you go if you've just had diagnosis. So I was talking to them about, can we have the paper published on the website? How can we get it out to the community and the families? So it's only a small experience, and we were kind of at the tail end of it, but the paper was published last year. It's recognized by the NHS. It's now being included in the epilepsy panels for testing. And we're still talking to the researchers. We're still talking to them about how we want to build upon the research. So we found a researcher with the University of Birmingham. He's now going to start collecting skin biopsies from the children. So we've connected him with the researchers from Yale, and they've had many conversations around in their speak. If I'd have joined one of those calls, I'd have had no idea what they were talking about, but they're connecting. They want to understand, okay, where are the holes? How can we fill that? How can we build upon the research? So hopefully that gives you an idea of how it can work in a really good scenario. We felt it was a partnership, like you say. It wasn't them just talking to us and saying we're doing this, that. So, and it really made us feel like they want to understand, how did the condition manifest in terms of symptoms, that sort of thing. So hopefully that can help them to kind of build upon and do it with other cases as well. So hopefully that helps answer that.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And I think that there's some good examples of different groups where our researchers can present to patients before they put in their grant applications at the beginning and then incorporate the patient feedback. And, lots of things I've come across are things like quality of life measures and all those kinds of things that might not have ever been included if one of the patient partners didn't say, actually, this is what matters. Yeah. Now, I just got a question. One of the questions that's come through is, based on your experience, how do you like to be engaged to be able to best share your perspective and some of the challenges that you might face related to your condition? Because interviews or being interviewed by somebody might not always be the way that, is most comfortable for you. Can you give us some examples? Because I know you've been involved in, I think, was it a film or sharing some information? So can you share with us a little bit about what made that a good experience for you?
Yeah, so I was approached by some wonderful researchers from the Carr University in Wales, in Bristol, and they were doing a film series for adults living with craniosynostosis, along with the film crew Fine Roller Media from Wales. And about 5 or 6 of us in total going to different destinations around the UK, filming different segments about what we're facing as we were growing up and into adulthood now. There's not much research out there for adults living with craniosynostosis or Apert syndrome or any other conditions in that craniosynostosis umbrella. So one of my segments was talk about different surgeries. I've had so many surgeries growing up and into adulthood as well. From obviously my fingers and thumb separated, to cleft palate, to opening my skull up so my brain could grow properly when I was 1 year and 6 months old, to when I was about 16 or 18. My most recent surgery was called a red frame, which means rigid extract. Oh, I can't remember what it's called. Sorry. Basically, it's a frame that goes around your head, and it's got bolts on either side and things. And that was my decision to have that done as an adult. But obviously, growing up, my parents made all the decisions for me. So I think that's really important to have my perspective on things and to be a part of that filmmaking project, having my voice heard. And in a nice way of storytelling that, not to interview questions all the time. It just flowed nicely. And on blog posts as well. I'm not really into making stories on blog posts or Instagram captions and things. I've actually started my own Instagram travel page to raise awareness that people with disabilities and syndromes can travel do day-to-day lives. Nothing can stop them from living what they want to do in order to achieve their dreams. I'm really powerful. Social media is powerful, but obviously it can change dynamics because the media can change the wording sometimes as well. But so that's really a delicate situation as well. So I think that's really a nice way of doing it through storytelling and from films as well.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Now, to go from that beautiful story to all about the money. So I've had a couple of questions come through about money and PPI.
Let me say something.
Yep.
So I just wanted to say how touched I am with your sharing and what you said about the story. And it made me think a little bit that as a researcher, we ask questions to the patients and the public, and it's about what we want to know. And also lovely just to go with an open space and allow those stories to unfold and come naturally rather than coming in response to a question. So I just thank you very much for sharing this. I wish we could see that film actually in Singapore as well. Thank you.
Was it bungee jumping or yep? So maybe we'll need to find it and link it to because we're recording this so people can come back and have a look later. So we might need to provide a link. And I think you're a very adventurous person. So some of the things that you've got up to in your travels, I would be way too scared to do. Sometimes to do PPI, we need funding to support people to be able to come out and do this work and have, travel to the middle of London to do some of these events. I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how you've had to go around getting maybe funding to support PPI. And then how important has that been to some of the economic arguments when you've had to go the policymakers with what some of the PPI groups have said that they need? Sorry, Charlie, we're giving you the really fun question.
Yeah. I think every time I'm on a panel, somebody asks me about funding and PPI funding because it's it's a challenge. I think as a funder ourselves, we need to do more and do better. And I think the early conversations is something that I keep coming back to. And I think, was it you that said just having a theme and going from there? I think that's, it's a real challenge. And I think and it probably sounds like it, but I'm dancing around the question already because it's just so hard. I think we're really fortunate with the funding we get. So we're funded primarily from the UK government, and split from kind of different ministries, but we're really lucky with that. So we're able to kind of pay for people's time and people to travel and those kind of things. And as I said, the first international stuff. So we've been able to develop that. But I think on the ground, researchers really struggle, and I think there's a lot of expectations on different places to find PPI funding. I think universities look at researchers to find it in their own pots, and researchers look to universities to say, well, surely there's some PPI funding available. And it just sits as a big gap. And I'm going to keep talking about the PPI fund that we do because I've worked on it a lot and it's a great source of pride for us, but also there's nothing else like it. I think it's certainly in the UK. I mean, I'm not going to speak beyond that area, but there's nothing else that's kind of PPI at the early stages. And I think as an entire sector, this is kind of bigger than just the academy or bigger than just open. It's kind of worldwide. How do we want to listen to lived experience voices, but we're not doing enough to enable them to be in every space. And I think, funding is a challenge. And I don't have a very good answer, unfortunately.
It's a challenge the world over. Yep.
Let's answer. So I'm Alex. I'm from the Academy as well, in the UK as well. I'm the head of international. So one of the other things that we do, which sort of strengthens our position, is through the Academy, and when we're looking at where we put funding and where we divert resourcing. In our 10-year strategy, engagement is front and center amongst other areas within it, and that gives us the sort of the backing for us to be able to, with confidence, be bold with our engagement work and where we put it in across all of what we do. And secondly, at our council level, which is essentially our board of trustees, we have two public patient members who sit on our council and board of trustees. And again, having that voice and holding us to account to be able to then make decisions on where we strategically fund and where we don't fund is critical to ensuring that engagement is embedded within everything that we do. And so we do have those mechanisms that sort of hold ourselves to account, which I think is positive. Am I allowed to ask a question? Or?
Oh, yes, I suppose. You've answered one, so you get...
Well, I don't have internet either, so I couldn't scan the QR code. I was just wondering, it's really interesting hearing your story, Adam, about the power of social media and Facebook and things. And I guess what I'm going to ask, from a negative point of view, the threat of misinformation and the fact that you're dealing with rare conditions and things where there's not much information on the internet, and the threat of misinformation sort of hindering sort of public and patient engagement. What do you think are there ways we can sort of stop that? I'm just thinking, for example, in research, you can look at a paper and see that it's peer reviewed and know that it's like a top quality sort of piece of work and things. And I'm just wondering at that sort of PPI level, that's not just a question for you, that's for researchers and others as well, because I think, there's certainly open for sort of abuse sadly from other people.
Mm. Did you want to have a crack at it?
I don't know if I'll be able to answer it, but I mean, it's a massive question. I mean, I wouldn't recommend anyone uses Twitter. I forbid to call it X because I think it's just preposterous. Because there's so much misinformation on there. I can give an example of where I feel that the community still has a really powerful role to play, and that there's so little known about CRELD1, and It was an article was published in the US around the study that Yale School of Medicine did around CRELD1, and because it's so new, there could be so many other children out there that have been misdiagnosed. Sadly, a lot of the children have really bad seizures, but actually there are a couple of children that don't even have epilepsy, and there's a lot of articles that are being published saying CRELD1 is purely linked with epilepsy, but the seizures could actually mask low muscle tone. Some of the children have low muscle tone, but a lot of the researchers think, the seizures are causing the low muscle tone. And there was an article published. One of the other mothers, actually, her son was one of the first in the US that was part of this study. She sent it to me and she said, this is really frustrating me that this article is misconstruing like the fact that this condition, it's not necessarily linked with epilepsy. And she had a real issue with the language used. And I think that's where we still have a role to play in like holding those accountable for they've written it. So we collectively got in touch with the authors of this article and said, look, we'd really welcome like a follow-up chat to talk through the condition. Her son was, thankfully, he doesn't have epilepsy, he doesn't have seizures, but he still has CRELD1 and he still has low muscle tone. And so they were really receptive. The authors had a call with the mother. They then edited the article, republished it that was purely factual. So that's an example of where I think we still need we can't just take anything that's published online as gospel. We still should challenge, and we should use the power of the community to actually get in touch with them and say, this hasn't been presented factually. It's not a case of saying this is wrong, take it down. Let's work together and make sure that it's a more comprehensive piece. Otherwise, you're at risk of potentially scaremongering other families, thinking that they may have something they don't. And it's just really important for the wider community that we use our voice to kind of hold those accountable. So hopefully that kind of helps you answer the question. But I mean, the crux of it is there's not enough guidelines and online security checks to stop this articles that aren't factually correct. You only have to look at what Meta have done in removing their team that is their sole role was to fact check articles before they're published, which I think is crazy that's been. But anyway, it's a bigger, it's a kind of issue at the heart of all online publishing at the moment, I think.
Thanks, Adam. Now I've got question for you, Lucy. One of the questions that we've had is about the difference between PPI and then being a research subject, for want of a better term, and how that impacts on ethics. So when you gave an example where you're working on a research study right from the very, very beginning, and then you became involved in data collection and analysis. What did that mean for ethics for you? And did you need to become an investigator? How did you juggle that?
So it was still, I didn't become, okay, we'll try to explain this now. So I was named as a co-researcher on the paper, but I wasn't the main researcher, if that makes sense. So the scientific researchers from the university did all of their ethics side of things. I wasn't involved in that in terms of submitting ethics to panel or going to respond to the panel kind of discussions. That was all them in the background. I guess the difference I perceive as being involved as a PPI versus active research. I think that's how I'm probably going to categorize them. So the active research side of things was more the questionnaires were sent around to the whole community to respond to what are your key kind of things that are important to you at this stage. Then that data was collected, and it was at that point that we kind of started those conversations in a smaller group where we were involved, and we were then drawing out the themes. We then thought about what is this research question that needs to be answered, and we then kind of mind mapped what that might look like. How might we collect the data? At that point, the researchers then went away and did their ethics bit around the thinking and the more specifics. Then we came back in. They collected the data. So I didn't physically collect the data with them, but then I was involved at looking at what the data had shown them and how they might interpret it. So I guess I would never have held that primary researcher, and I think it would be wrong to do that as maybe not in the future. I don't know. Getting there. I feel like that line is changing. I feel like there is it's starting to blur a little bit. And I feel like at the moment, the academic systems probably aren't open enough in ethics to be able to say, you can involve this person from day one. I think that's still a barrier, actually, in many ways, because you'd almost have to get ethics approval before you could get involvement to get somebody that wasn't in the research department to take part as a researcher. So I think there are some systemic barriers there. So I think we did it in the nicest way possible, if that makes sense. I don't know if I've explained it very well. And then obviously afterwards, in terms of dissemination, it was us that was like, well, how do you want to disseminate? Like, this is what we found. This is what we found with you. And a bit like you said, Adam, we were involved in reviewing the paper that had been written before it was published, making any adjustments. And then it was us that said, actually, yeah, we would be willing to participate in like a SoundCloud podcast. And yeah, these are some of the questions that we might ask you. And then they very much said to us, what else would you think is important? And then we talked about the editing of that before it then went live. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's great. So I know that we're coming to the end of our time. So what I think we might finish off with is a bit of a rapid fire. In 5 years' time from now, what would you like to be able to say about patient and public involvement, either specifically to the communities that you work with or systemically? So I'll let you think about that for a second. Whilst I draw your attention to another QR code. We love a good QR code. And one of the questions that we did get was around how can we support, researchers and clinicians to be better prepared to help with patient and public involvement. So we do have our open website. We've got a lot of our events have been recorded and they're available on the website. And we are also having our training sessions this year, both for our patient partners, but also for researchers and clinicians that might be interested in being involved in PPI. And we've got quite a few different links there too. So check out our website. Okay, so rapid fire, because in what is also traditional here in Singapore, there's food that will be waiting for us after this. So rapid fire, in 5 years' time, Charlie, PPI, what would you like to see?
Diversity, thinking from the academy's perspective, much more diversity with the people we work with and working across everything we do. I think we've got colleagues in different teams, as I kind of showed, that do lots of different things, and we're getting into all of them, but not yet. And I think 5 years' time, I want a bigger team and I want us to be able to work across the academy. And yeah, that's just keep growing and keep growing, I think is the way I look at it.
Joanne. So I'm going to borrow something in my hobby work. I work with disability groups as well. And one of the things in disability groups that they talk about is nothing about us without us. That's a tagline from that group. And I would say nothing about us without us seems to be, a good way of thinking about all of these things, whether it's rare disease, cancer, or anything like that. And so one of the challenge I have is the younger doctors. Earlier, just very quickly, you talked about funding. There really isn't funding at the moment in Singapore for this kind of work. And so I rely on a very dedicated, passionate, motivated team. And I've been lucky to have been able to hire a very dedicated team. But I've every now and then come across doctors who will say to me and say, and seriously, this breaks my heart. They'll go, why is this my job? Why is this something I need to do? That going beyond bit, right? And understanding the patient's involvement and all that. So I hope that sentence never appears in 5 years' time, and that nothing with us without us.
I love that term. I think it's brilliant. Firstly, hopefully there wouldn't be a need for an event like this if it was being done well. As much, it's a fantastic event, but hopefully we shouldn't be having this conversation. And it's a shame that funding is a big obstacle. It's a big obstacle for so many things. But I think in 5 years' time, it's the first thing that researchers think if they're going to be embarking on something. I mean, with my participant hat on for Genomics England, there's so many examples of where researchers don't think it's needed, or it doesn't cross their mind, or they think, it's going to be too much of a barrier. Hopefully, you can see through these stories that it's such an enlightening way to approach research, and hopefully it's in 5 years' time, it'll be the first tick in the box that, yes, we are working closely with the patients at the heart of the research, and it's not seen as an afterthought. So
I would really like to see more creative methods used in research so that the stigma around systematic versus narrative or qualitative research is gone. I'd like to see them like equally valued. And I'd love to see a bigger variety of approaches. We've started doing some work around pupil voice within the research I'm doing. And actually the young people have just made a big map of their journey. And then we've talked about it. That map has become part of the data. And I'd love to see more of that in the future, I think, because I think it would make research more accessible. I think it would make people more open to reading research, because actually that's a huge barrier. Actually, that is my other big thing. I'd love all papers that are published to be able to be read by a 7-year-old reader, because I think if all papers could be read by a 7-year-old reader, everybody would be able to understand them.
Yeah. I think from my point of view, from a patient myself and being grown up with a syndrome, I think it's really important for researchers to reach out to us. We're the ones that living with this condition, and we're the ones that have experienced it. So it's our story to be told, and I think we've got a powerful voice and it needs to be heard more. Coming to Parliament, actually, I was invited to Parliament to raise awareness about my condition and others. I spoke to MPs there. I feel really empowered to actually listen to my voice or try to make a change in the UK's government and things to help people more with my condition and others, or people with disabilities. And like Adam says, we are the heart of research and things, and it's just really powerful. Our voice is powerful, and it needs to be heard more. Well,
thank you. For me, I hope that in 5 years' time, PPI's time is as valuable as the researchers, because we do also put in time and effort to go to all the meetings, all the discussions, and it's very funny if you think of this way. If you're a business owner and you want to open a coffee shop, who do you look for to get ideas what coffee to sell? Coffee drinkers, right? So if you're a researcher on a certain disease, why are you looking for the person that has the disease? So if you look at it that way, okay, back to you, Joanne.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Sorry. So our time has gone very quickly today. Please join me in thanking the team, Charlie, Joanne, Adam, Laura, Lucy, and Ray, and Eileen, and Mira and the Open team for putting this together. Also, a big thanks to the College of Clinician Scientists at the Academy of Medicine Singapore as well, because without them and the Academy of Medical Sciences as well, we couldn't have done this today. So thank you.